Okay, I'm gonna mute us in a second here.
Enjoying the last few months traveling around the province, meeting with individuals, hearing their stories, their concerns, what we can do and what we can't do. And, the bottom line is that Albertans want to just enjoy life. They want to be able to work, raise their families, and to do it in a healthy and safe environment. And with the intrusion of government into our lives and the mandatory lockdowns, picking winners and losers, was nice to hear the Premier admit that it was wrong to shut down the small independent businesses, yet we're still struggling with those. And we're just going to have an open and honest discussion here tonight on some of the questions that need to come up. And, as I'm looking on the Alberta website here tonight, alberta.ca stats, the COVID-19, currently it says we have 511 hospitalizations, 97 in ICU. We've had 575 deaths. And then we get to the stuff that seemed quite alarming, 17,743 cases. And as I was scrolling through this earlier today, and you go down through the various web pages as you go through on cases, characteristics, severe outcomes, they get down. And this to me is part of the confusion, and what we need to talk about is these cases, these 17,000 cases, because when you scroll down through their different levels of their web page and get down to comorbidities and whatnot, they actually talk down at the bottom, and it's so hard to follow through the same links twice in a row. But they say that, the normal flu, there's a death of 1 in 1,000 cases, but COVID is 1 in 100 cases. And they use this term cases, to me, totally in the wrong way. It's very confusing, and it's actually fearful for many people when they hear that. There's 17,000 cases and 1 in 100 people are going to die. That means we're going to have 1,700 deaths here, and it just isn't the case. And so those are some of the things that we're hoping to have an open discussion, people talk about. But I just feel that the government and our health individuals need to come forward and talk more openly. Okay, there's 511 hospitalized cases. The real question is how many of those people had preconditions? How many, are suffering from other things, and they've come into the hospital, and yes, they've tested positive for COVID-19. They have it, but it's not their underlying problems. We have 97 in the ICU. To me, they should be telling us, actually of those 97, there's 80 of them that are over 75 years of age, or there's 3 in here that have actually had no preconditions. They were healthy, and they're here in ICU in critical conditions. But more information to me is always better, that we can actually calm our minds down, think things through, and understand what's happening. It's another real struggle when we don't have a baseline. They've told us other years, we've averaged 40,000 deaths in the US from the flu. We've had how many here in Alberta traditionally, how many deaths? And that's another very interesting discussion that many have brought up, is that we average about 2,000 deaths a month here in Alberta. That's a lot. And when you think about it, it's kind of scary. But when you look at the COVID deaths, and in 10 months, there's been 575, or 7 months, is that 60 people? And we're having, 2 or 3 deaths possibly a day from that. But every month there is, about 2,000 Albertans that are passing away. And if you put that into perspective, it kind of, I think, settles people down a little bit to realize that, wow, there's 60 people that died today in the province. 3 of them had died with or of COVID. But of those 3, actually today, all 3 of them had comorbidity issues, and we're struggling. I mean, hypertension is the number one. You look on the different charts, anywhere from 77 to 87% of the people are actually have hypertension in these severe cases. 77% of the people actually have 3 or more preconditions that are dying with COVID-19. And the hysteria that they're causing is doing more harm than good. And again, of those 60 people that died, are they going to tell us how many were suicide? How many, had other conditions? What are the causes of all these other deaths? But because historically we don't talk about death every day, now that we're doing it, it's much more, I want to say, still shocking, even, 7 months into this, that it's shocking to hear the numbers every day, but we don't share that. I've done a lot of trucking and driving down into the US. When you go into Montana, the first thing you see when you cross the border is how many people have died this year in car accidents. And it's always kind of shocking. You start off the year at 0, you might go 15 days, nothing. All of a sudden there's 2 or 3, go 2 or 3 weeks, no deaths. Then all of a sudden there was 7 on the weekend. And it always amazes me, how many people die on Montana highways in a given year. We don't see that here in Alberta. Perhaps that's something else. Would we all be driving a little more cautiously if we heard every day that, wow, 3 people died yesterday on the highways? And there's just so much information out there that can overwhelm us when it hits us in a new way that we haven't been talking or discussing in the past. And to me, this is a real problem with the coronavirus, is that it is novel, it's different, and there's no question back in March when this was hitting and we saw what was supposedly happening in China, again, who they weren't open and honest with us, but then we saw it hit Italy, we saw it hit New York, and there was certainly a concern that we need to protect ourselves from this and have this shutdown. And it's interesting, when I was looking today on the graphs, trying to see where we are on the curve, I couldn't find a graph that actually showed going back to March. They were waiting to May and to April, some of them June, and then showing the escalation where they're not actually showing us. So there we are there. We're kind of seeing some of the charts that are coming up. But anyways, the point is that it just seems to me that our health officials aren't doing what I think needs to be done in order to calm the nerves of Albertans and let them have a apples to apples discussion on what's really happening. There's no baselines from last year. And I mean, it's just ridiculous to me to think that we've had 0 deaths and 0 cases of the flu this year. Every year the flu's been a big deal. We've had vaccinations, for how many years, come in, get vaccinated for your flu shot. And all of a sudden this year we have 0 cases of the flu. Every case is COVID. This is not adding up to me. And I don't think that the government is being honest with us as Albertans and what we need to be doing. And so there's just a lot of questions that I think that they should be answering, or information, probably more important, on what should be out there. Another thing, when you go to the website and you look up treatments, there's 0 there. They say there is no treatments, but yet when you go and search around the world and see what other countries and places are doing and the different tests that are going on, there's a lot going out there, and yet we don't talk about that. Another concern for me is they say, well, if you're feeling sick, stay home. Well, at what point then, if someone's feeling sick, should they come in? Because everything that I've read, the most important thing, if you're feeling sick and this is coming on, is that you should actually get in and get treated early. A lot of the different treatments that are being tried around the world, and again, we don't even hear about hydroxychloroquine. You got ivermectin. There's just many different treatments that are supposedly being carried on. I don't know if anybody in Alberta is being treated with any of those things. We know that President Trump was treated with one of those drugs. I've forgotten the name now. But why do we not hear if there is any treatments? And people think that, well, there's nothing that they can do, so why bother going? I'm still okay. And we don't have the results. Another thing that's very frustrating to me is, why don't they do the tracing and following? If there's 1,600 supposedly positive tests today, and the PCR testing, again, is a whole problem in itself, with lawsuits popping up around the world, in the fact that, that this PCR test is very flawed. You read reports anywhere from 50 to 90% of them are false positives, and that they've let the cycles go too far. And even with that, with the cycles, they don't know whether this is an active and live virus, or whether these are broken parts from a previous virus, coronavirus, that we may have been carrying. There's a lot of unknowns, but yet they don't follow and see that. I was actually talking to a correction officer today. He and his brother both are correction officers. They work in different facilities. They're down in the States, in Arizona, actually, kind of a hot zone. And it's just interesting because they both work on the same shift, but two different facilities, and they ride together. They live in the same house. The one who was at a facility where they actually had an outbreak of COVID, never had any problems, but his brother started to feel a little bit sick. So thought, oh, well, we'll go get tested. And they went and got tested. And the brother, whose facility didn't have any cases, actually had the COVID-19, and he had to isolate for 14 days. The brother, who was completely healthy, was told that he couldn't come in. So he had 2 weeks off, no pay, and was tested twice, and both times negative. And so there's a lot of, what would I want to say, variables in what and how this is being passed and where it's from. But I just think that Alberta, if they want to do some tracing, they should be calling those 1,600 people, and they should be letting us know, those 1,600, 800 of them feel fine. 1,500 of them feel fine, or 100 feel sick, and actually let us know what's happening amongst those that have been tested positive. How many of those are false positives? We never hear any details about that. And all of these things are very concerning to me. And I think we need to have an open discussion here tonight on what kind of questions that we believe that the government should be forthright with and letting us know. But there's one other thing. Because of COVID, and again, I wouldn't be doing this, and it's amazing how we adapt to the conditions that we're exposed to. But our AGM is coming up for the Wildrose Independence Party on January 23rd. And we've decided that we're going to have to do this by video. We're not going to be able to come together. And so I decided, well, if we're going to have to do that, we better start getting this all organized and to start having some trial runs so it runs off smooth. And so tonight is our first attempt at this. We're seeing how it works, and we're going to try and get more, what would I say, accustomed to this technology, and to be able to put up PowerPoints and different ways to communicate with people and to talk back and forth, have the questions. But I have Kathy Flett, our Chief Financial Officer of the party, and she's the chairperson of our AGM committee that's here tonight. And so she's going to tell you a little bit about what's going on with the AGM, and she'll be joining me to answer some questions from you, the viewers, and to ask us questions about the COVID, ask us questions about the Wildrose and what we're trying to do. But just really happy to have such a bubbly, happy, dynamite individual as Kathy, who just gets a lot done and always does it with a smile on her face. So Kathy, are you with us? And look at that. Looks like the technology is going to work.
It is. How do you like that? That's awesome.
Well, as usual, you always bring a smile into the room, and it's contagious. So maybe you want to take a few minutes and tell us about the AGM, or a little bit about yourself and why you got involved in the AGM, how we're going to do this, and let the members know what's happening.
Sure. Well, for those who don't know who I am, I'll start there. My name's Kathy Flett. I'm born and raised Alberta girl. It's all I know. It's what I love. This is home for me. And it's home for my family, and to watch what's happened over the last several years, things just cannot continue to go this way. And I think some of us are we're done. It's time to stand up. It's time to do something about that. And all roads for me led to Wipa. So here we are. My role in Wipa is I am the CFO currently, and I'm loving that role. Actually, most people don't, but I do get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And as such, I also got to be honored with planning the AGM, which has been really exciting, at the same time really challenging, because with all of these COVID restrictions that are going on, it's been a bit of a moving target. And finally, my team and I decided, you know what, we're just going to do what Albertans do, and we're going to get this done one way or the other using the tools that we have. And so it will all be streamed live. Every member across this beautiful province of ours, when they buy their registration ticket, will be given a link to be able to join us live from the comfort of their own home. So January around here tends to be pretty cold. We don't even have to worry about traveling. So it's going to be a treat, although I'm really going to miss that interpersonal connection that comes with these kinds of meetings, and being able to meet you guys live and in person. So I'm looking forward to the day when all this COVID stuff is over and we don't have to deal with that anymore. We can get back to the job of living and doing the things that we love to do on a daily basis. The AGM is going to be on January 23rd. So for those of you that are members, mark your calendar. For those of you that are thinking about being members, buy your membership and mark your calendar. And then if you're having any trouble figuring out how to register, reach out to any one of us and that are on the board now, and we'd be delighted to let you know how to do that. Some things to keep in mind with this AGM is, well, three things actually. There's going to be three different sets of votes at this AGM. The first one will be bylaws, the second one will be policies, and then the third one will be the board. We've got to get all these board members voted back in. And with the bylaws and the policies, we're going to do things just a little bit different, and mostly because of the challenges that we're under. We're going to pass those as omnibus bills. So for those that are attending, I want you to go on the website and I want you to read through those documents more than once. They're long documents, so take your time, study them, because we are going to pass those as omnibus bills, knowing that we are going to have a policy convention shortly down the road to be able to kind of take those apart if we need to, or just say, yep, everything is fine. But that's how that's going to be done. So I want everybody to read through those and make sure you're comfortable with them, so that at the AGM you're voting the way that you really want to vote for both of those both of those motions. The other thing is, with our board of directors, we're now at 28. We will be going back down to 20, which isn't really the tough part. What is the tough part is we're an interim board, so all of our seats are up for renewal. We all have to come back and fight for our spot, those of us that want it. So I'm also asking the members, really do your homework. Whoever wants to put their name forward to be on the board of directors, shoot us an email at contact@wipa.party and let us know your intentions. We'll make sure you get that package and all the information that you need. And then once our nomination committee has got all of that sorted out and figured out and everybody vetted through, we're going to release all of those names of the people who want to sit on the board, on your board, for the Wildrose Independence Party of Alberta. And do your homework. Make sure that those that you want in there are the ones that get voted in, because they're going to take this the next step, the next step, the next step. And if I'm involved, I'm going to say right on through to independence. So that's what's going on with the AGM. That's a little bit about who I am. And Paul, I'll turn it back over to you and wherever you want to take this next.
Well, thank you, Kathy. Very informative. I see one of the questions that was answered is, how much is the AGM? It's $50. So keep the questions coming in. And I guess I want to go back, and another question, or people that are grateful for, and I certainly am, is that our premier has said it's not going to be mandatory. But my question is he going to step up and say to Albertans that there's not going to be any discrimination regarding vaccinations? Because it could easily be such that we could have different companies and organizations here in the province saying that, oh, unless you've got your vaccination, you can't come in here. And I think that he needs to speak out on behalf of all Albertans. And again, we're all to be treated the same. And it'd be very discriminatory to me if all of a sudden we can have different groups and organizations, because they're so paranoid and the fear level is so high, that they say, oh, you can't come in here unless you got vaccination papers. So I think the premier needs to take a step forward one more and say that there'll be no discriminatory practices, and nobody will be able to ask whether or not someone has actually had the vaccination. I think that, another very important paper that came out that I put a lot of weight in is the Great Barrington Declaration. The three experts that collaborated to put that together did a great job. And then, they've had just over 10,000 physicians, medical practitioners, over 30,000 that have talked about it and shared their concern on what the damages and the long-term repercussions of all these lockdowns are having. And they talk very much, and this is to me where we need to be, is on focused protection. We know who the more vulnerable and those at risk are now, and those are definitely seniors, the elderly, those that are in senior facilities, and those with preconditions, hypertension, diabetes, kidney disease. All of those, if you have a precondition, there's no question that you need to be extra careful. You need to self-isolate and to be able to look after yourself. But there's just so much fear mongering, and the numbers that are getting out there, it's very hard for the average person to be able to decipher and go through it all. And another real concern, that the shutdown of the schools, these kids, from 7 to grade 12, what's going to be the long-term impact for those individuals? And like I say, myself personally, I have a lot of faith with the Barrington Declaration, and they've done a lot of research. They have a lot of numbers there. They have a lot of questions and answers at the bottom of the page. And I just really wonder how much, I guess I want to say, information is our premier and our health officials looking at, or are they just looking at the side that, we've got to reduce the number of deaths, and doesn't matter what the consequences are, it's just the number of deaths because that's what we're talking about and that's what we're focusing on. And the number of deaths are always concerning. And like I say, if that's really their focus, then say, today we had 2 deaths from COVID, but the other 58 people that died today were from, hypertension, had heart attacks, they had health issues, renal, whatever it is, or like I say, suicides, domestic abuse. All of these things we've been told are going up, but yet it's never part of the discussion. But what the other real problem is the economic hardship that's falling on people, especially small businesses that just got devastated with the last shutdown, and now they're going into another one and the restrictions. But happy to answer more questions here. They're popping up. But Kathy, do you have any comments on the COVID and what you're hearing? And it says here, the online registration, it is live now. I think the link is there and ready to go. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. Yes, it is there. Yeah. And as for the COVID thing, boy, to ask me if I have anything to say or an opinion on that, that's a loaded question. I've got a lot to say and a lot of opinions on that. Not the least of which I'm just shocked that we're not allowed to ask for a second opinion. I don't understand that. Like, there are all sorts of doctors, practitioners, experts in their fields with all kinds of letters after their names that have a different take on all of this, have a different focus, have a different opinion on it, and research to back it, papers to back it, and yet they're being silenced. And that really troubles me. That really bothers me when we're not allowed to hear both sides of the story. And when I'm hearing, I'm out talking to people or on Facebook, chatting with people on there, it bothers me that there's this fear as though if you get the virus, that's it. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all. I don't know how many of our listeners or anybody really in Alberta saw it. Hopefully lots, and I hope it goes around like wildfire. But the Center for Constitutional Justice and Freedoms put out a fantastic paper just this week that outlines the whole picture, the whole COVID picture of what happened. And nobody's minimizing the 500 and what are we at now, 560 or 70 deaths that have taken place. Nobody's minimizing that at all, but we certainly cannot minimize over 10,000 small businesses lost in the midst of that. We can't minimize livelihoods destroyed. We can't minimize marriages that have broken down as a result. We can't minimize a whole generation of students whose education has been supremely compromised because of all of this. I was talking to a friend of mine, his daughter's in high school, and I was chatting with her a couple of weeks ago, and she was relaying the story to me that about 60% of her class is failing because they're having a hard time adjusting. Are we in school? Are we not in school? Are we online? Are we not online? And so many of these kids, that online learning just doesn't work for them. They're hands-on. They need that classroom. And the kids are not the ones that are getting sick. So why are we sending them home? Why are we stopping hockey? Why are we stopping dance? Why are we, all of these healthy activities, we're taking those away? And I just don't understand the reasoning behind it. And I'm not finding any answers either.
Kathy, on the Great Barrington Declaration, they talk about the working well and why are we attacking them? And again, they talk about kids should be going to school and life should be going on as normal, except for those high risk individual. And again, focus protection. And there's just no question we need to do that. But, we should back up when we keep saying we don't understand why this is going on. We actually do know one thing, that our prime minister back, I think on the 29th of September, when he was talking to the UN, Prince Charles, Klaus Schwab, these people are openly coming out and saying we need to take advantage of this COVID-19 for the Great Reset. And again, when anybody goes to the World Economic Forum and looks at their vision for 2030 and isn't scared to death, that they're sitting on the communist, socialist, fascist board then thinking, wow, this is great. And that is certainly a concern for me. I'm amazed at how many Albertans, Canadians, people around the world have received this propaganda that somehow this socialism, this fascism is a solution. I mean, one of the on their webpage, when you look at the Agenda 2030, one of the things is it says that you will own nothing but be happy in 2030. And I just can't believe it. I've met people, think that, we need to be more like Venezuela and have, everything nationalized and there shouldn't be private enterprise. And I don't think that there's a better example that we shouldn't be studying and showing our children, because there's a country that was rich in oil and gas, has reserves very similar to Alberta. And yet you see how devastated those people are after 30 years. They were the number one country in South America, and now they're second from the bottom. And why? Because of dictatorships, because of socialism, because of the attack on the free market and the destruction of their economy. And there's no question with this Great Reset, they want to see our economy collapsed, and those people that are for it. And again, when we go back through history, it doesn't matter which country you go through, whether it's Russia, China, any of these regimes that have just brutalized their people and taken over and imposed, I just want to call it martial law, as communism, totalitarianism, dictatorships. The hardship and the suffering and the amount of people that have died is incredible, but yet it seems like our younger generation aren't aware of it. And they think that, this would be great. Wouldn't it be wonderful? And again, they're talking to these young people that really don't own anything, but yet they're happy. And they say, well, it's going to be the same way. And I always love to talk to young people when I'm talking to students and whatnot, and say, if you think that the redistribution of money works well, then it should also work well with the redistribution of marks. And I can assure you that any classes where you have those that are excelling and doing well and study hard, and they want to become a surgeon down the road, or they want to be a research scientist, those individuals are keen and they work hard. But boy, if we started redistributing the marks and they got 98, 97%. And then when they come back after the first test in the next grade, when let's say in grade 10, 11, and 12, we started redistributing marks so that everybody's going to graduate the same, that by the time they got to grade 12, there would be very, very few individuals that are working hard and trying to excel, because they know that, well, only way I'm going to get into university is if my name's the one that's pulled out of the hat, and I might not even want to be a doctor, but they're going to tell me that's what I need to be. When what I want to be, is a space engineer or something else. And this idea of redistribution, I don't understand how it's so enticing to so many, but they just don't seem to step back and understand it. And again, we just really need to understand that there is a force out there in the world that wants to see our economy collapse. And in all of this COVID problems, the long-term problem could well be the debt that we've accumulated and the money that we're spending. And again, saying at this point, well, we have to do this to protect people, when I just don't see the numbers happening that the fear needs to be out there. We need to protect those that are at risk, that the working well, the students, the kids, they should be able to carry on life and not have to have all of these conditions. And again, no Christmas. I can understand immensely the pressure that our premiers and our prime minister are under, but they need to step back and realize that the most important thing that they can do is to gather the best information they can and share it with the people, and then people make personal assessments. I mean, Christy Noem from South Dakota, I think, has done a phenomenal job at keeping their economy going. And again, people are criticizing, and again, my empathy goes to her. Her grandmother has passed away this last week. But the vicious attacks of those people that are so fearful of life, I don't understand why they can't go home and are happy to seclude themselves and to isolate, and people are more than willing to bring that there, but yet they want to point the finger and the anger at other people saying, you shouldn't be out there doing that. And that just isn't the way that peace and prosperity goes forward, that we need to respect people, we need to respect their concerns, and we need to respect those who want to go out or need to go out and earn a living. But there's lots of problems going on. I'm going to answer a few questions here. One's asked, how is CA development going? Well, we kind of slowed down, but we did switch and did our first one by web or by Zoom. And we're going to start doing our CA developments through Zoom meetings. It's just something that we need to do in order to grow it, because probably the two most important things I feel that we need to do as Wildrose members is we need to build our CAs and we need to build our memberships, and that can carry on. You know, we can talk to friends, we can call, we can do those things and do that, but we can't let this stop us, and especially the fact on this attack on our personal freedoms and thinking that government has all the answers. Because all of these small businesses that are being devastated, I don't know what percentage of them are going to start up again, and how many people have lost their entire living in these shutdowns and this, I want to say, this paternalistic government that seems to think that it's their job to tell us how to run our lives, what the risk factors are, and those things. But Kathy, do you have a few comments you want to make? And I'm going to read a few of the questions here, and then I'll get back on.
Sure. I want to touch a bit. You had said, we know who this virus really likes to attack, and that's generally it's the elderly and the people that aren't healthy to begin with, and that's kind of normal for any of these viruses that go around. I remember several years ago when the swine flu came around, and it went through my family. My son and my husband got it, and they were ill. They were sick for about 4 days, and then they were fine. Fast forward several years, I'm looking after my grandmother who's in long-term care. She had advanced in years enough, and her health was that poor that she needed to be there. She needed that 24-hour assistance, but I was there to be that support, to be that extra set of hands, that extra set of eyes and ears, that family care. And she had dementia. That's what she died from, was dementia. If she was still here today, she would have absolutely no comprehension of what was going on. All that she would know and understand is she hasn't seen her granddaughter in months and months and months and months. And by the time I am allowed to go and see her, she wouldn't recognize me at all. And there's this humanity piece that's being completely tossed aside. And I remember going to visit her every winter like clockwork. Between the end of September until the end of March, different parts of the building would be on lockdown because there was a flu outbreak. And every single time, whatever part of that building was in, there were residents there who were lost, who passed away. They either passed away in hospital or they passed away there at the facility. It's just, but at least they had somebody beside them. And now we don't have that. We're not allowed. And it's just, it's all so wrong on so many levels, the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of questions here. Who has the most oil reserves? We have more than enough. I don't know. Are we number 3 in the world? Number 4? Our problem is that we don't have access to the world market, and it's been frustrating for years. And again, I just have to comment again on TC Energy's Nova Gas Limited expansion line in northwestern Alberta that Prime Minister Trudeau wasn't happy with the National Energy Board, said it wasn't tough enough, and he created the new Canadian Energy Regulator. And in that, there were a lot more additions, the upstream, downstream effects that were added to that. TC Energy spent, over 2.5 years meeting all the criteria, doing all of the consultations and reaching out, and their application was actually given the 2 thumbs up on the 19th of February this year. It was a 5,500 job project, $2.4 billion. They were ready to go this summer. And what happened? It was hijacked by our Prime Minister's cabinet and says, well, we need to have a look at this. It's not good enough that our energy regulator said it's okay. Now we need to look at it. And they're supposed to have it looked at and decided on in 90 days. And on the 19th of May, they refused to release their answers. And they says, oh, we need more time. And they used the excuse of COVID. And they didn't release that answer until the 19th of October, 240 days after the Canadian Energy Regulator gave the go-ahead. TC Energy wanted to get in and get working this summer on it. They should have been. And there were a lot of oil and gas companies that were lining up drilling and expansion through this winter. But because that expansion line wasn't going forward, has been a domino effect, and extra drilling has been reserved now and held back. And our premier said and did nothing. And for me, the thing that I remember him promising the most is that, we're going to be focused on jobs. We're going to be focused on pipelines, and we're going to be focused on standing up to Ottawa. And our premier was silent, never said a word on the 20th of February when the CER gave the go-ahead. He waited for the Prime Minister and his cabinet to look at it, never said a word on the 19th of May that I'm aware of, and it certainly wasn't in the news that, they didn't answer in the 90 days. And then for him, a couple of weeks ago with our new conservative leader, Aaron O'Toole, sat on the stage and to me had the audacity to say that, if we can't do better on our environmental progress, we're going to have trouble raising the capital to do the projects that we need to do here. And that's just so backwards in the reality. We've seen billions, tens of billions of dollars leave this province because the political climate and their policies have shut them down. We lost Tech this spring early on. They pulled their project off early because they were afraid, and I'm sure that they probably had through back doors from cabinet saying, we're not going to give the approval. And they didn't want to have controversy on their other projects throughout Canada, so they withdrew it. And this is a self-fulfilling prophecy where these politicians are saying that, we need to do better on our environmental progress or else the capital's not going to be there. Trans Mountain, all they had to do was follow the rule of law and arrest those protesters that were stopping the work, and instead they didn't. And, the TMX was halted, and our Prime Minister stepped in to buy it to say, we're going to get this done. Well, this is worse than a third world country where a few dissidents can set up roadblocks and stop progress. They're not charged. They're not held accountable for losses. And then they say that, it's because we're not making enough progress on our environmental standards. We're the gold standard. The innovation that's come up here in Alberta is second to none. And yet they want to point the finger and shut down Alberta. I love the Miracle Network. I think that there's no question, two of the greatest breakthroughs and benefits for humanity in the last 100 years has been carbon fuels and antibiotics. And that's just enhanced the quality of life And the best thing that Alberta could do would be to be shipping more propane and natural gas around the world, especially to those places that don't have the fuel that they need to cook their food or to purify their water. There's lots of things that can and should be done, but yet we've been demonized, and our Prime Minister and many Americans have pointed their finger to shut us down, and this is hurting humanity. And we need a premier who will stand up and say, no, we have the environmental standards, we have the labor standards, we have the human rights standards, and we're going to continue to lead the world in innovation and progress, but we just don't have that. But anyways, boy, what's another topic here? One of the questions is there any parallels to when I was the leader of the Alberta Alliance back in the 2000s? I guess if you want to say are there any parallels, it's kind of like this COVID. It was serious back then, but now it's much serious. We're on life support, in my opinion. When we see these deficits and what's going on across the country, I don't know how my children or my grandchildren are going to pay that back. And again, I'm going to go back to what Trudeau wants to do is let's reset it. Let's have all those people that have debt, we're going to wipe it off and you won't own anything. And I think that if we end up in that situation, Albertans are going to really regret not standing up for themselves before now. Says, do you believe the current situation actually meets the criteria to be a pandemic? Absolutely not. It's interesting that I think it was last November that the World Health Organization actually changed the criteria for a pandemic. So this would fit in there. And again, that's where a lot of people will say that this is a plandemic, not a pandemic. And I would have to agree that these things they're what would I say? The current governments and those on the socialist agenda and on the Great Reset are using everything they can to help bring that to pass. And that's why I think they're having all these shutdowns. We have another person here, not really a question, but he's hoping to set up Airdrie East. Oh, tomorrow. Well, good luck on that. I again wasn't following that, but it's exciting to see each of these CAs up and running. Another question, can we add new members to our CA boards and VP after a constituency AGM? Absolutely. As the boards get together, they can talk and discuss and reach out for more people to come on, because you're able to start with a very small board with just 3 members or 2 members, I believe it is, and then you can reach out and grow. Here's another great question. Will Alberta be getting a PST? Well, not if the Wildrose forms government, but I have to say that, you know, our finance minister has been pointing towards it. And I guess I got to talk when it comes to taxations and the problems and the deficit that we're running here, and the premier and the finance minister saying, you know, we're looking hard. We don't know where we can make some cuts. I'll tell you the cut that we need to make. It's the cut with Ottawa. We can't keep sending $40 and $50 billion down to Ottawa and get 20 or supposedly $30 billion worth of transfer payments or health transfers and carry on our province. And there's no question in my mind, the 2 most critical things that we need our premier to do is create the Alberta Revenue Agency and start employing Albertans and collecting all the taxes here in Alberta. And we need our own police force. Anything short of that is going to be to our detriment. And that's the first place where we absolutely can and need to make the cuts. A lot of people refer to this problem that our public servants, our bureaucrats, and our civil servants are all overpaid compared to other provinces. It's true, it's a fact. But if we were, and again, the Constitution talks very much, and there's been a few cases that have set precedents that you can't have a tax on a tax. And when our teachers, our nurses, our police individuals, our senior caregivers, all of our public servants that are working for us municipally, provincially, they're only paid by taxpayers. It's taxpayers' dollars here in Alberta that pays them. And so when they pay taxes and 30 or 35% goes down to Ottawa, that's a double tax. That's a tax on a tax. And we absolutely need to stop sending that money. There's no reason why the provincial government should send those T4s down there and say, we're not going to allow a tax on a tax and keep that money here. But the only way I can see us even starting to climb out of this is by collecting and keeping the taxes here, looking at federal programs and say, oh yeah, the military, we need to support that. We'll be part of that. You know, border security, absolutely. And those things that actually are to the benefit of the country in Alberta, those are the areas where we should be sending the tax dollars. But we just need to focus on that. And again, Murray, absolutely, we need our own pension fund. If you look at the numbers that have been shown, there's no question that we're contributing, you know, between 2.5 and $3 billion a year into the Canada pension plan over and above what Alberta seniors are getting back. And if we start our own Alberta pension plan, it would immediately be in a positive situation, and we'd actually start to have a fully funded pension plan and not one that's dependent on more people coming in and more payments coming in. And we could actually reduce our premiums. We could enhance our benefits for our seniors. And there's no questions that we can absolutely, I think there's 56 countries around the world that have already made agreements on pensions. And I think that we'd qualify to get in there. We'd be a stable country, and I just don't see it being a problem. Another question here, why is Alberta refusing to even consider implementing this Great Barrington Declaration? Well, it's not just Alberta. I don't know anybody other than Christy Noem from South Dakota, and it seems like there's one other area where they've refused to shut down the economy. Sweden again, but Sweden, you know, I was going to look today and I haven't updated, but when you look at the year-long curve in Sweden and you see how many cases they had, you know, last November, December, January, February, and it curved down, you know, after that initial response, like any typical flu season, it was interesting to see, I guess I want to say the world pressure saying that they've failed and that they're getting a second wave there. But when you look at the second wave there, I don't think that it's as third of as high as what it was last season. And so I think that it has proven to be successful, but around the world, we're certainly seeing the fear amongst political leaders to say we can't afford to do that. But the Great Barrington Declaration, I think, carries a lot of weight, and I hope that we'll get more health officials that will take time to look at that. Next question, do you have any thoughts on the Edmonton Eskimo name change or the greater PC culture in Alberta? You know, I don't think there's anything derogatory. Maybe I'll be slammed for that. But growing up, I was envious to see the hardiness and just the ability that the Eskimos had to live and survive in the north, and to think that people could survive there year round. I mean, it was an icon of Canada, in my opinion, that we'd talk about those people that could make igloos out of snow. And as a young boy, I used to love making snow forts and building those. And again, when you look at the language, I think in their native tongue, they have like 20 or 30 definitions of snow. So here we just talk about snow. Oh, it's wet snow. Oh, look at the size of the flakes. Up there, they knew and they understood the environment and what it was like and how to survive. And I actually, like I say, I think it shows a great deal of respect. Edmonton is from the north. They've always been famous when it comes time for the Grey Cup, that the miserable weather and who can pull through the Eskimos, because they're tough. Anyways, that's my thought on that. Let's see. Do you believe in allowing private healthcare to operate in Alberta would be beneficial? You know, there's nothing anywhere in the world that competes with the free market. And when we do that, it's just amazing, the innovation. And again, when you look at the number of patents around the world, it's always those areas that have the free market. And I'm in... I just can't remember the name of the doctor, an Australian doctor, but through the 70s and the 80s, I'm old enough to have friends and relatives who suffered from ulcers. And again, the big pharmaceuticals were making $2, $3, $4 billion a year on antacids and all the problems. And I believe it was Dr. Brown. I should be able to remember his name, but I don't. down in Australia who said, no, this is an infection. And that's what's causing these ulcers. And he was demonized. And again, this goes back to what we're talking about COVID. Why can't we allow people to be willing to try? But he actually took a lethal dose of the Heliobacter bacterium, showed that he had a healthy, here it is here, the doctor who drank infectious broth gave himself an ulcer and solved the medical mystery. But he was, Barry Marshall. But I mean, he was absolutely demonized and attacked, viciously attacked for years. But it wasn't until 2005 he finally receives a Nobel Peace Prize for his work. And to me, it's the same with this COVID. There's so much stuff going on around the world and different trials and observations. It's interesting in those places, the more tropical places where worms are a problem and people are taking ivermectin, they see that those people that have been taking the deworming medicine actually had a reduced number of COVID cases or less. And again, hydrochloroquine, there's just been no question that there's some efficacy there, that it does work. And again, I originally was going to U of A as a pharmacist, didn't end up graduating there. He had health problems and my father ended up passing away and I came back to the ranch. But like I say, I'm very big on pharmaceuticals, healthcare, and what we have accomplished. But boy, I tell you, it's not an open and free market there. And we need to change that. We just can't have this domination of different groups and saying you can't try this and that. And here in Alberta, I've talked to one doctor who has patients on lupus and other things and actually prescribes hydroxychloroquine to those individuals. And they've been stopped and they've had to fight to get that. And for big government to step in and say that we have a free market, it just isn't so. But anyways, we need to have a free market, and it's important that it stays there with us, and it'll help us. It says, what is your stance on independence? One second here. Don't erase them on me till he keeps erasing the questions on me, and then I'm reading the next ones and I get confused here. But what is our stance on independence? We're in a really, really deep hole here, and they often say, well, when you're in a bad hole, the first thing you got to do is stop digging. And our problem is provincial, but our bigger problem is federal. And when you look at the amount of money that's been sucked out of our economy, $600+ billion that has left our economy, we're often compared with Sweden, who now have over $1 trillion in their heritage fund. Well, we could have $600 billion if we'd have put that into our heritage fund instead of sending it out to Ottawa into a black hole. There's many people that are so passionate and love to be Canadian. I understand that. But when we're in a broken and dysfunctional relationship, I'm sorry, we have to have a family sit down and an intervention and point things out to say, look, this is where we're at. This is the situation. Our partner here is dysfunctional. They're not working. They like to act like a Saudi prince and travel around the world and put on big parties and throw money here, throw money there. And we can't afford to do that. And when you've got a broken, dysfunctional relationship, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a business, one of the things that you have to do is separate the bank accounts. And that's why I'm so big on an actual Alberta revenue agency. We can't keep sending our money down there. We need to put our house in order. For me, there's about 6 things that need to happen. Number one, we need to have our provincial police force. We need to have our Alberta revenue agency. We need to have Alberta pension plan, and we need to have our own employment insurance policy here. Those things just need to be put in place. And then there's another big one. In the 1930s, our Premier Brownlee fought hard and brought us from a third-class citizen to a second-class citizen with the Resource Transfer Act. And we absolutely need to have the Environmental Transfer Act. We cannot have Ottawa or Paris or Kyoto or other areas say that, oh, you guys can't develop your oil and gas. The rest of the world can, but you can't, and we're going to shut you down. I just see no way forward being in part of Canada. But when we put our house in order, show Albertans that we can do all this stuff, and we actually have the Environmental Transfer Act, and just, you know, shrug our shoulders when it comes to Ottawa and them dictating what they say we can and can't do, that once our house is in order, I think then Albertans will have the confidence to actually vote and say that we need to be a sovereign nation. But until then, we need to work in the situation that we're in. I'm convinced that if we can form government, that we can show Albertans the benefit of being a sovereign nation, and the peace and the prosperity will be second to none anywhere in the world. And so I'm actually quite excited to be part of the Wildrose Independence movement, to put our house in order, and then actually letting Albertans, in a very clear and simple referendum, do you want to be your own sovereign nation, or do you want to remain in Canada, and let Albertans make that decision? But as for me, I'll be voting for independence. And another question that comes up, you know, we need independence first, but there's a current party option for the 51st state. Well, my short and simple answer to that is that just look at the mess that the US is in. Why on earth would we want to be part of that? We're already a small fish in a big pond. I think we'd be a guppy in an ocean if we were to join the US. I personally don't see any benefits of wanting to link up with the US. As a sovereign nation, we would have lots of leverage that we don't have. Another one that, you know, people talk about is that we're landlocked. Well, as a province, and having Ottawa overseeing us, that we are landlocked. But as a sovereign nation, we would actually have a lot more leverage and ability to negotiate and get access to tidewater and to trade around the world. And so I just want a sovereign nation that's free to stand up for ourselves and to bargain. I mean, another problem here in the West too that we always get punished for is Ottawa is always protecting the auto industry. Ottawa has always been protecting the dairy industry in Quebec. We could actually open up and have free trade with the US and not say, well, we got to worry about our aluminum or something else, that we actually are willing to compete and happy to compete. And so I think that opportunity is there. I want to thank you for that question. How do you plan to spread the good word on Wipa, and how will you win an election? Well, you as in me, I won't win an election. We as Albertans can win an election. How do we spread the good word? You know, there's nothing like compound interest, and there's nothing like compounding our membership. If every member, if they were to go out just once a month and say, you know, these are the things that I'm looking at. This is what WIPA stands for. Go to their website. Tell me what you don't agree on, what needs to be changed. Every month, if we could double our membership, the election would be over by the time the next election. And so the number one thing to spread the good word is for our members to go to our website, wildrose.party, read over, you know, our vision, our goal, our purpose, and talk to other people and sell a membership. The other thing on how you can win an election is that it actually does take money. And we received a little bit of criticism for putting out the last email that I put out on the last day of the month saying, you know, that please donate and help us out here. But and they says, oh, you're just like every other party. Well, every other party has to raise money for an election. And so the way we spread the word is donations will really help us. We can up our quality of our broadcasting and other things as we get more money. We're run on a very tight budget here, and I think what we're able to produce for what revenue we have is incredible. You look at our UCP party, and I don't know, a couple of months ago, they were still whining that, oh, you know, because of COVID, we quit asking you for money, but we just need you to pitch in now because we need to pay off our debt from the last election. Again, another inherent problem. They couldn't even balance their budget on the election. They overspent, which certainly showed us their behavior and what they were going to do, thinking they need to overspend in order to remain in power. But we'll win the election by building CAs. I would love to see all 87 ridings up and running within a year from now. And more important, that we have 500 members in every CA and $5,000 in the bank. That'll be a great start and a good position forward. We don't need a lot of money if we have a lot of members. If we don't have a lot of members, then we need a lot more money. But if we have members and money, I think that we have a great opportunity here to show Albertans that there is a viable option and actually a bright future. How will you respond to unite the right crowd about splitting the vote in the next election? Another tough question for many Albertans as they think about that, and when they first talk to me and says, oh, we can't afford to split the vote, we can't afford to have the NDP in there again. And I asked a simple question: can we afford to let Ottawa be in control of our future for another year, for another 10 years? To me, the voters' question that needs to be on the ballot next time is, can we afford to keep the status quo and to be a second-class citizen in a country that's very divisive, in a country where the majority do not like what we're doing? Our Prime Minister has absolutely said he wants to shut down our industry. They've got us in a stranglehold with COVID. They're leveraging that, wanting us to shut down our businesses. And to me, the ballot question next time has to be, do we want Alberta in control of our future, or do we want to be subservient to Ottawa and having Ottawa to continue in our future? And again, it's interesting. I've been saying this for months, but it started to come up, and I think, which was it? There's a report that came out today, the Fraser Institute, I think, and talked about a have-not province. Well, I've been saying for months that the only way, and again, our premier says, we want to have, a referendum on equalization. Well, equalization will be coming to an end one way or another. Either one, Alberta is going to get... our industry is going to continue collapsing. And again, with that Fraser report that came out today, we've been knocked off as the best place and the richest place in Canada, and our ability to grow our economy is now second behind British Columbia. And it's a real problem. We have animosity from the Laurentian elites. They want to shut us down, even when it's to their own demise. They don't understand it. And again, we have a prime minister who says budgets balance themselves. Why they even want our money is beyond me. They think they can print their own. Well, do it without us. But the ballot question absolutely needs to be status quo, or are we going to take control from Ottawa? Do we want Ottawa in control or Alberta? And I believe with that on the ballot question that Albertans will realize that it's not about splitting the vote north and south or rural or industry-wide. It'll be about those who realize we need to take control in Alberta versus those who want the status quo. So thanks for that question. What will you do for our education program? So many things being taught that should not be in our program. And what is your stand on private education or the tax dollars following the student? The tax dollars following the service, whether it's in healthcare or education, is critical if we actually want to see progression and excelling in those areas. Our healthcare is great when you can get in, but the wait times are way too long. COVID is again, we don't have the numbers. They don't tell us that, this many people have died, that it should have been come in and been diagnosed with cancer, or that should have been treated, for whether it's heart, lungs, kidneys, whatever. How many people are losing their lives because of the COVID shutdown? But the funding following the patient, the funding following the student is critical for a prosperous and I want to say an advanced education and advanced healthcare system. And again, when that funding is following the patient and the private education, I think you'll just be blown away at the different areas that will excel. And it's just a major plank in our party platform and something that Albertans can count on. We need recall. Boy, if there's anything that I have been hard on or been preaching my entire life in politics, it's been accountability. And there's only one way elected people can be accountable, and that's with recall. I've always said it's very simple. If 50% plus one of the total number of people who voted in the last election sign a petition in a 120-day period, that individual's recalled and there'll be a by-election. It's just critical. This idea that government thinks that it has a mandate for 4 years because they get elected, every wacky idea they have in their brain, they think that, oh, we've got a mandate from the people. Carbon tax, that was never discussed before the last election. 2 elections ago, I guess. What could we have done if we had recall? In 2008, as a member of the Legislative Assembly, I brought forward Bill 8, begging the Conservatives to pass this, that we need accountability. They laughed at it. I think in 2011, 2012, the Wildrose brought it forward again. It's been brought forward by the Wildrose at least 3 times in the legislature. Our so-called conservative governments have never passed it. And our premier promised that. He promised citizens initiative referendums, and he promised that he'd have recall and accountability. And again, if he's really concerned about the future and doesn't ever want to see Alberta struggle for 4 years under the tyranny of a majority government, he should not only pass recall legislation, he should have it in next fall's municipal election, and there should be a referendum that the people of Alberta can pass that and say that, no, we want recall. Because if we don't pass it in a referendum, any government can go in, just as Stelmach went in with Premier Klein's balanced budget legislation, and remove it in a few minutes. And we need to have that enforced through a referendum. And had Premier Klein put that to the people of Alberta, we wouldn't have started on this multi-year deficit. I don't think that we've had a balanced budget since like 2008 now. So 12 years of deficit budgets, where had Premier Klein passed that in a referendum, then Premier Stelmach, Premier Redford, Prentice, Notley, all of them would have had to gone to the people to run these deficit budgets, but they didn't. And so we need recall, we need balanced budgets, and those things need to be there. Is it not in the Constitution that we cannot be held back from commerce if there is a case of landlocking? Well, in the Canadian Constitution, it says that the provinces, there's not supposed to be any barriers between the provinces. It's supposed to be free trade. That doesn't exist. We know in many cases, whether it's dairy, whether it's wine, beer, there's even for teachers, we keep signing these so-called free trade deals and pacts with different areas. But yes, it's in the Constitution that we're supposed to have access. But again, there's many areas of the Constitution that they don't respect, let alone enforce. And again, the worst one is that you have the freedom of assembly, but you don't have the freedom to protest and stop and cause harm or loss to people or to businesses. And they don't even, the basic rule of law on that they lack. And so, and again, though, as a sovereign nation, you can sit down and negotiate. And again, to tell BC or to tell the East that, you know what, there's going to be no more commerce from Asia coming through Alberta and going to Eastern Canada to the tune of, I think, of over $700 million a year if we can't ship our oil out. And again, you just need to actually stand up and negotiate. And good neighbors can get along if you're accountable. But if we are always trying to appease them and their complaints, you don't get anywhere through appeasement. You need to bargain and make the deals. I would love to see more tax dollars going back to those who choose homeschooling. I can't remember what the actual funding is for homeschooling, and that's certainly something that we can look at and ensure that homeschooling individuals are getting the money that they need to offer a great education, especially under the current situation with COVID. And it'll be interesting going forward to see the dynamics and what we're doing to help students, because that's what we're doing now. They just sent all of the students grades 7 to 12 home for schooling. And do they have all the necessary equipment and hookups to do that? And so it's certainly something that we want to make sure that those people that are homeschooling have adequate funding, but the tax dollars are only so much, and so we need to be careful. Let's see, what's that next one here? So Kathy, are you still there? They're asking for a question for you to recap on the AGM. And we're told that the registration page will go up on the screen. So Kathy, are you there?
I'm back. Awesome. I was actually listening to you on my husband's phone, and the questions that came in tonight were amazing. Those were great, great questions that came in. Listen, guys, as Paul has already said, we need everybody on board to make these changes in Alberta, to make our future what we want it to be, not what somebody else thousands and thousands of miles away decides it's going to be. And a major part of doing that, you heard me talk about this at the beginning, I'm going to talk about it now, is this AGM that we've got coming up next month, January 23rd. I want you to mark your calendars. If you want to participate in this, you've got to become a member. So your first step is to become a member. Get on the webpage. It's super easy. A couple of clicks, $10. That's it. And then get yourselves registered for this AGM. We want your voice to count. This is your party. This is your party, Alberta. None of us are career politicians. We're you. And we can't do this without you. The passion that is on this board right now is like nothing I have ever seen before. We want to keep this momentum going. We want to get more people involved. And again, if you really believe that this is something you're called to do as well, whether it's as a board member or something to do on the CAs, maybe one of the committees that we've got going on, reach out, let us know, help us get you plugged in. And I'm sorry that we have to see you virtually at the AGM. I am absolutely sad about that, but at least we don't have to stop making progress. We're going to find a way, just as Albertans always do. So get your AGM registration, get your membership if you haven't already gotten one. And if we don't get an opportunity to meet you guys in person between now and January 23rd, surely we're going to be allowed to have our lives back eventually, and we will meet you in person then. Otherwise, find us all on Facebook, LinkedIn. Some of us are on Twitter. Get connected. Let us answer your questions. Let's just do this together. It's time.
Well, thank you, Kathy. And again, this was our first night. Thank you for tuned in for the questions. We have 2 questions left that I'm going to answer. We're going to try and do this every Thursday night at 7. We'll see if that works out, and we'll get the feedback from people. But again, I'm just thrilled that we can communicate and to talk. It's not the way I like to do it. I prefer to be in person. Love to be able to shake hands, look at people in the eyes, and to answer their questions. But the last 2 questions we have here: has a 2-tier healthcare system been discussed? Well, we're actually living in one right now, in my opinion. When you look at those in the healthcare industry and workman's comp, those people can actually get their needs met much quicker. Again, if I go back to the funding following the service, there's a lot of doctor offices throughout the province that are private. And people talk about, what about private healthcare? Well, in reality, every person that's in the healthcare business is private. Many in the past have owned their own buildings. The government's kind of switched and tried to push to own the buildings, but it's still private businesses that the doctors incorporate, and they're private enterprises and professional corporations. And so is there a 2-tier healthcare system? To me, there already is. But when the funding follows the service and you get innovative people that realize that there's a long lineup, whether, it used to be, it still is bad for MRIs, but there's no reason why we don't have a competition between the different regions, and saying that, look, we're willing to run our equipment 24/7. That'll drop down our costs, and we can do MRIs for $800, or to be innovative and actually have different professional corporations and individuals bidding to Alberta Healthcare to be more efficient and to have better funding and just faster service. And so we absolutely want the funding to follow the service, and whether that goes to a private clinic or an individual or to the health region, it's not important. What's important is the quality of service and the speed of that service. And then the last one, a great question, and again, there's answers, but what would you do about stopping the funding for abortions. You know, this is one of the what would I want to say, great controversial discussions in the last 50 years that's gone on and on and on. And this is where, to me, there's nothing more important than citizens initiative referendums. There's no politicians, well, I shouldn't say no politicians, there's not enough politicians that would want to bring this up and discuss this. But if you have binding referendums by the people, which needs to be in the Constitution, those people that and I'm one of them, I don't see why we're funding abortions with taxpayers' money, but this needs to be brought forward in a referendum that's binding on the government and going forward. And I'm excited to think that in the future that we could have our own country with our own constitution that's absolutely focused on protecting the individual, their life, their freedoms, their property, their pursuit of happiness. We've been caught up so much in this idea of the good for society. And when you look back at all of the atrocities throughout the world and history, it's always some tyrant who's saying that, oh, society's going to be better without this group, or if we get rid of that, or these things. And these tyrants get people all worked up, and they're jealous and envious and angry at different groups, whether it's religious, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's gender. All of these things work to our detriment, and we need a constitution that absolutely is focused on the individual, protects the individual's rights. And I'm just excited that, like I say, there's just an incredible group that's working hard. If you look at our policies, I think you'll be impressed with what's on there, but you'll even be more impressed as we're working now on a constitution for Albertans. I'm sure it'll be more than a year in the making when you think of the other great constitutions in the world, and especially the U.S. They came together for months to work that out, people that had spent their lives thinking about it. And we're going to do that, and we're going to up the ante because we've had 200 years to see where the weaknesses are. And like I say, for me, the two biggest weaknesses are, one is governments that don't have to balance their budgets and can buy votes from different regions with not only our children, but our grandchildren's money. And the other one where, like I say, that they're unaccountable for 4 years. I mean, I just can't believe that we'd ever hire somebody or give somebody a credit card with no limit and say, hey, go and enjoy life for 4 years, but don't forget to look after me, because that's the situation we're in. And there's two things that we know that are bad, and that's power and free money. And so we need to have that in the Constitution, but we'll certainly be able to have a future with that. And I've got one last question. I said only two, but it says, please go over the merger history with Wexit, as many still don't know that FCP and Wexit got together to form the Wildrose Independence Party of Alberta. And so briefly, I have to admit that in order for me to keep my sanity, I can't hear things that are troubling that I'm not doing something about. And so I really withdrew from politics and tried to ignore it as much as I could. I always lived by the motto, I don't make calls, I only take calls. But anyways, on the 29th of June, I received a phone call from one of the individuals on the new board saying, hey, tonight we're voting, and it's very positive that we're going to be merging the FCP and the Wexit. And unfortunately, the person that we had lined up to be the interim leader has some family issues and isn't going to accept that now. Would you do it? And I laughed and said, I have absolutely no interest in doing that. I've got a beautiful wife, wonderful children and grandchildren, and really enjoying life. And the last thing I wanted to do was to start spending 24/7 thinking about these problems and solving them. So I got a second call and a third call. And finally, by the fifth call, I just kept thinking about my grandchildren and said, what will I tell them in 20 years from now if I didn't stand up and fight for Alberta's future, and seeing the status quo and where we're going was unacceptable. But long story short, Wipa and Wexit got together. They voted. I think it was over 95% of the membership on both sides said, yes, we need to come together. We need to have strength in numbers. And we did that. They've come together. I wasn't part of the choosing the name. Not sure how they went through it. It's always difficult to find a new name with Elections Alberta, but they came up with the Wildrose Independence Party of Alberta, which is the merger of the Freedom Conservative Party and the Wexit movement. And that's the history of it. And let's all make history, join it, be part of the Wildrose Independence Party, and let's make Alberta great. And we'll be back next week to answer more questions. And you can always call 1-888-507-0379 or go to our website, wildrose.party. So that's www.wildrose.party. But really appreciate the questions and those of you that tuned in, and looking forward to next week already. And this one's over, but thanks, Kathy. It's been a pleasure. And we'll see how it goes this week and what the hot topic is next week. Good night.